The UFC is headed across the pond, and they are taking a former world champion with them. UFC London will feature Leon Edwards in his first fight since losing his title. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks. I'm going to break down the entire UFC London fight card, giving you my picks, predictions, and DraftKings fantasy plays. Before I dive in, let me show you what our website has to offer to help you build winning DraftKings fantasy lineups. I'll first start with what DraftKings fantasy even is. I understand this channel will get a couple 100,000 views every month, and not everybody understands everything. DraftKings fantasy is very similar to a fantasy football or a fantasy baseball. You have a set salary. You have to draft fighters based off their price points and build a lineup. You then take that lineup and you compete with other people. You can compete for money, you can compete in large tournaments and try to chase giant paydays, or you can compete for some fun. Overall, I love DraftKings Fantasy. I think it's a really fun way to spice up your fight watching experience. If you do want to start playing DraftKings Fantasy, or if you're a seasoned DraftKings Fantasy player, we have an entire suite of tools for you. One of those tools is what's called a cheat sheet. This isn't populated yet because we haven't had the weigh-ins yet. This gets populated every Friday night after the weigh-ins and after the dust has settled. This cheat sheet is going to give you the fighters, their salaries, any ownership projections, scoring projections, leverage plays, but then also how we think you should use these fighters, if they should be in cash pools, GPP pools. All of this is information that you can use yourself to build DraftKings fantasy lineups. If you want to use a tool to build the lineups for you, you don't want to have to make those type of granular decisions. You want the tool to do all the work. Well, we have a tool called an optimizer. The DraftKings optimizer will literally build lineups for you. If you are a seasoned DraftKings player, you're familiar with what an optimizer is and what an optimizer does. What we have done is we have built one from the ground up. We used to lease a different product, and that was perfectly fine. But when you lease somebody else's work, you don't have control. Now that we have built our own, we have full control. For the advanced people, or for the people who know what they're doing, we've added a couple of new features, including minimum exposure. We've always had maximum exposure. This will be preloaded with the ownership projections. If we jump into the advanced options, you can set your randomness, which is the disparity between lineups. You can set a total minimum salary, maximum salary, and you can play all sorts of games with the numbers to get exactly what you want. Once you get it where you want, you click Build Lineups. After you click Build Lineups, the first section you're going to see is the fighter exposure. And from here, you can make adjustments. Maybe you're looking at this and you're realizing, I have too much exposure to Mick Parkin. Come back up here, make your adjustments, reset. If you want to see the actual lineups, you click Show Lineups, and here they are. Here's every single lineup the optimizer built for you. You can sort by page. You can jump in, look at those actual lineups. This was a feature highly requested that we pushed out last weekend. Once you're ready, you click Download CSV. That'll print out a document that you use, you upload it to DraftKings, and your lineups are good to go. If this is your first time, if you're new to the DraftKings fantasy world, you want to use an optimizer. Again, we get hundreds of thousands of views. It is unreasonable to expect that every single one of those people understands what an optimizer is or how to use one. So what we have done is we've lowered the barrier of entry. We love this sport, and we want you to love it as much as we do. So now, if you want to experiment with DraftKings Fantasy, you want to use a DraftKings optimizer for the first time, we've made it easier than ever. We have what's called a beginner mode. You click that one button, it enters beginner mode. And what beginner mode will do, instead of expecting you to change numbers and understand what you're looking at, it's just going to ask you simple questions. It's going to ask you questions like, who are your 3 favorite fighters? Which fighters don't you want any lineups with? Who are your 3 favorite underdogs? And after a few questions, you click a button, boom, here's your lineups, and you are off to the races. The DraftKings Optimizer is available right now in premium membership. We also have what's called an event simulator. This is going to simulate the fights 100,000 times. It has every single fighter on the card. It has their implied win probability loaded up, not only at a high level, but also at a round level. You then come in here, all you have to do is click Run Simulator. And what this is going to do is going to take every single one of those fighters. It's going to use the implied probability. It's going to take in historical DraftKings points. It's going to take in historical grappling and striking stats. And then it's going to simulate those fights 100,000 times. And then once those simulations are done, you'll have full data and details that you can dig into. like how it expects the strikes, the takedowns, the control time to go. But then also you're going to see the ability to build DraftKings lineups from here. It's going to take the information from the simulations, and then it's going to allow you to build lineups. You can go ahead and make some adjustments based off of bias. Maybe the simulator thinks Jan Blachowicz is going to win and you don't, so let's lower the bias or let's just remove him entirely. We click a few other buttons. We make a few choices to be fully compliant with DraftKings terms of service. We click build lineups, and here's the exact same screen we saw with the optimizer. Your full fighter percentages and ownerships, and you click download CSV. You have your file. You load them into DraftKings.com. I have spent 5 minutes running through what you can do. And this is only a few of the tools that we have at We Want Picks. We also have copy-paste bets, an artificial intelligence. We have picks. We have other tools for different things. Everything you could ever want or need heading into a fight week is available right now for freaking $10. Everything I mentioned is worth more than $10 on its own, let alone this package and everything else that we offer. It's $10 for an entire month. Every single thing at WeWantPicks.com is under one umbrella for $10. Just go to WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member. You'll have everything you could ever want or need heading into a fight week, and you will for not only UFC London. You'll have UFC Mexico next week, UFC Vegas 105 the week after that, and UFC 314 the week after that. WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member at the top. And if you couldn't tell, I'm quite passionate about all of this. Genuinely, we have built this from the ground up. Anybody can just start some random Patreon and post their 6 bets and then tweet like a maniac. Anybody can do that. Anybody. And many people have tried to do that. But it takes an enormous amount of time and effort from a lot of people, not just me, to get this up and running. WeWantPicks.com. It's if you haven't been to the website, just check it out. Just check out the website. It is not just some random placeholder bullshit. Josh, the web guy, is grinding behind the scenes. The developer is grinding behind the scenes, pushing code, pushing updates. Jacob is doing all sorts of creative, interesting content. We have somebody helping provide the DraftKings projections. I don't come up with that off the top of my head. We have a whole crew of people behind the scenes making this the best possible experience. So yeah, I'm super passionate about it for a couple of reasons. One, this is my baby, other than my 2 actual babies, 2 beautiful girls. 2, this feeds multiple families. There are multiple people that work and love and live and breathe We Want Picks. And that passion gets passed on to you through freaking the lowest possible membership and the greatest possible solution on the planet. WeWantPicks.com. I will ride till I die, baby. Let's go ahead and break down this card. Right off the rip, at UFC London, we have Guram Kutateladze. That's where I always screw up the second T. It's Kutateladze. The t is what screws me up. We have Guram. He's taking on Kaue Fernandes. Guram opened up his UFC career as an unbelievable striker. He showed up. He had professional kickboxing experience. The guy has incredible takedown defense, great power, great scrambling abilities, accurate, all those things. He showed up in the UFC and beat Mateusz Gamrot right off the rip. First ever UFC fight, beat Gamrot. And people were like, oh shit, this guy is good. Then all of a sudden, things got a little trickier. Lost a couple in a row. Got chinned by Elves Brenner. In his last fight against Jordan Vucenic, who we'll break down later, dude was dropped. He was able to survive, piece it together, turned into a wrestler, but he was dropped. Guram, on the surface, unbelievable striker. Wildly accurate, powerful, fast, creative, all of those things. But in execution, he's got a ridiculously close win that could have been a loss against a wrestler. He did lose to Damir Ismagulov. He did lose to Elf Brenner. Right there, he would have been cut. If he doesn't get the close Gamrot decision, he's cut. But he was there to live another day when he fought Jordan Vucenic after he got dropped. He was able to survive, but Jordan was on short notice. Guram is an insane $9,400. Don't spend that money ever, never, ever, ever in a million years, never, ever, ever. Even if you think he wins. He's taking on Kaue Fernandes. Kaue Fernandes is good. He's loose. He's a powerful striker. He'll bounce around on his toes. He'll stay on the outside of the pocket. Then he'll lunge in, fully commit to everything that he's doing. He's not afraid to engage. He's got plenty of cardio, good forward pressure, solid takedown defense. He does get flashy with his striking because he'll be a little just loose and having some fun, but he could also dial it in and stay technical. He is coming off this finish win over Muhammad Yahya, where he got those leg kicks going early. And here's the reality of the situation. Caue Fernandes is a good fighter. I actually do think he beats Guram, because I think Guram at this point in his career is getting way too much credit on things he did 3 years ago. But even if you think Caue loses, which is a reasonable thing to think, you can't spend the money on Guram. You can't. $9,400, you're going to need to finish. He's not finishing. Caue is tough. And I know it's Caue and not Caillou. Caillou is that weird bald kid on PBS. Caillou. It's Caue. But sometimes I just see the words and I say the words, okay? I think Caue can absolutely win this fight. I think he can come forward with pressure, stay in Guram's face, not let Guram settle in. There is a world, though, where Guram wrestles his tits off, and if he does that, he could definitely win this fight. That's how basically Mark DeCasey beat him. So I'm going to pick Caue here. I might have him in a lineup or two when I'm using all of these tools, when I'm using the optimizer, the event simulator. I'm going to add some bias to Caue because I think he's going to do a much better job than the odds, than the implied probability, than the salary, all that crap. So I'm going to do some bias there. Ultimately, Guram wins or loses, he's not going to score those points. Then we have Nathan Fletcher. We need to ride Nathan Fletcher to the motherland because he's fighting Caolan Loughran, and I think we all hate Caolan, right? Like we all, I don't know if it's just me and I'm just some weird hater, but I think we all agree Caolan's annoying. That whole, I'm going to meet in the corner McGregor, all that fucking bullshit just for him to stand out there and fight like a woman. Actually, let me take that back. That's a wild insult to women because we're going to break down the Shauna Bannon Puja Tomar fight next, and those women are going to get after it. We haven't seen Caolan get after it. Guy's afraid to engage. Boring, annoying, stupid stance, punchable face. We hate Caolan. We're rooting for Nathan Fletcher. The question becomes, does he actually win, and is he worth the money? And that's a tough question to answer because, yes, he was able to finish Sigmantis Ramaska. But that is tough. Nathan is tough. He's an Ultimate Fighter alumni. He broke his leg on the Ultimate Fighter in a fight and just continued to move forward, continued to fight like he didn't have a broken leg. And just a testament to how tough he actually is. Overall, he's decent everywhere. He's a decent grappler, decent striker. He's always looking for a finish, good enough chin. And he is coming off this submission win over Sigmantis Ramaska where he had big-ass takedowns, but they were sloppy. Taking down Caolan might be a little tricky because he does have that annoying, dumbass, punchable face and stance. And that, first of all, this flag is wrong. Caolan is not English. He's Irish. Don't trick the people. This is a disservice to English people everywhere. Yeah, English people put fucking cold tuna on potatoes. Makes no sense. It's disgusting. And you guys are eating like war rations on the regular, and I don't understand it. But Caolan Loughran's not one of you. He's worse. He's disgusting. Anyway, Caolan Loughran's actually a decent fighter. Can't stand the fucking guy. But he's a decent fighter. Before the UFC, he was a very good fighter. He had a good wide base. He would just send kicks with real power. He was fast. He would move forward. He was not afraid to engage. Then all of a sudden he ends up in the UFC and he's just staring at people. He turned into a full-blown wrestler because he doesn't like trust his striking or he doesn't like getting hit. And then he's just staring at people on the feet. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if the UFC is so special to him and he's intimidated by it, so he's afraid to lose. And he's fighting not to lose instead of to win. But the UFC version of Caolan Loughran is not the same as the pre-UFC version. He fights different. A lot more wrestling, a lot less striking. And it's not like his wrestling is amazing. Yeah, he was able to take down Jake Hadley. Do you guys know how freaking small Jake Hadley is? Just an eensy-weensy, teensy little boy. And Caolan took him down one time and kind of got bullied the rest of the fight, lost that fight. Caolan Loughran is tough to break down because he's got skills. We've seen it pre-UFC. And if he engages in a fight and if he lets his hands go and he fully commits and if he mixes in the wrestling, he can have success in this fight and a lot of other fights. But if he's staring at you, afraid to engage, backing up, too wide of a stance, then all of a sudden Caolan Loughran is not going to have that same level of success. I am going to pick Nathan Fletcher here, but there is something to be said about Caolan being a decent underdog. I think he is a decent underdog here, especially at $7,800. There is a world where he wins. And for everybody who says, oh, Angelo's biased, I just told you how much I hate this guy. And then told you he could win this fight. Okay? There's no bias. Honest Ange. Like Honest Abe without the beard and the wooden teeth. Then we have Puja Tomar and Shauna Bannon. This should be a really fun fight. This should be sloppy as shit, but a fun back and forth fight. Shauna Bannon is a striker for the most part, traditional martial art background. She's always coming forward. She likes to pressure people. She does seem to force things, like she's not super technical, but she will come forward. She'll bomb away, throw sloppy punches, get you to the cage, shoot sloppy takedowns, just overall sloppy as hell. But she is not afraid to engage or to create a fist fight situation. She is coming off of this win over Alice Ardeline, which frankly I thought was bullshit. I don't think she won that fight. She gave up 2 takedowns. She gave up 6 minutes of control time. And yeah, she landed more total strikes, but I don't think it was enough total strikes to account for 6 minutes of control time given up. But Shauna Bannon is coming off of that win, and the whole world decided she should be a big favorite. And she is a favorite. She's taking on Puja Tomar. This is not the Irish flag. This is the Indian flag. And Puja Tomar is the first ever female Indian fighter in the UFC. Obviously, quite a bit of hype. The UFC is probably going to do a good job trying to promote her. India is the most populated country on planet Earth. The most populated country on the planet. There are more Indians than there are Chinese. So yeah, the UFC is going to do everything possible to expand that market. And I know for a fact there's a lot of Indian people in the town that I live in. They love fights. They love gambling. So I love the Indians. And they love their Puja. Puja has a ton of online support. And I get it because she does her country proud. That ranting and raving I did about Caolan Loughran embarrassing his nation, standing there like a fucking idiot. Puja doesn't do that. Puja will fight. She'll fight. Is she the best fighter in the roster? Not even close. Is she super technical? No, not really. But she's fast. She's aggressive. She loves coming forward. She'll bring the fight to her opponents. She's not going to back up. She throws every strike with intent. She's trying to finish people. She'll box in range. She'll box out of range. She has grappling holes. That is the biggest issue. The fact that she really doesn't do a great job defending takedowns, doesn't do a great job getting up if she is taken down. But she's not afraid to fight. She's coming off of this win over Rayan dos Santos, where she basically just threw one kick at a time. It wasn't an exciting fight. You're going to see a clip, like there's a clip where it was exciting for like 30 seconds, but outside of that, wasn't particularly exciting. But that was her UFC debut, lots of pressure. This is a very different environment. I think Shauna Bannon wins this fight. I think Shauna Bannon wins this fight because of Puja's grappling holes. And not that we've seen Shauna Bannon come out here running around, shooting a million takedowns, but we know she can. And Puja cannot. So if Puja's not winning the striking exchanges, she doesn't have a backup plan. If Shauna's not winning the striking exchanges, she does have a backup plan. That is the only reason I'm going to pick Shauna. The salaries are wild. This should be a pick'em. I cannot believe Shauna Bannon's as big as a favorite as she is. What has she done to be that big of a favorite? I can't believe she's a favorite, let alone a big one. So if I'm building a DraftKings fantasy lineup and I've got some salary to spare, I think some exposure to Puja makes a lot of sense because as far as underdogs are concerned, she's a good underdog on this card who can A, win, and B, put up some numbers, just sheer volume. 95 significant strikes in her last fight. She scored 69 points in that fight. And this was an uncharacteristically slow fight for Puja. I told you she was just throwing one kick at a time. I imagine Shauna Bannon is going to move forward. That's going to force Puja to move forward, and they're both just going to get after it. Pick your side. I am going to be on the Shauna side again because of the grappling gap from Puja. But I do think, underdogs-wise, building a DraftKings fantasy lineup where you have a budget to work with and you have to use underdogs, Puja's a decent one. Then we have Andrey Pulyaev taking on Christian Leroy Duncan. Andrey is making his UFC debut. He's a solid striker. He likes to take his time. He'll time things. He'll keep things tight. He uses a jab more often than most other fighters do. But there's nothing behind it half the time. Sometimes it's literally just jab, jab, jab. There's no right hand right behind, just jab. He can be low volume, but he does a good job working the body. He does a good job on the feet transitioning to takedowns if he needs them. He's a well-rounded guy, and he does have a nice little win streak going on here. But despite that win streak, I think he still has to prove some things to some people. We haven't quite seen what he can or cannot do. We haven't seen him in a ton of trouble. We haven't seen him beat anybody very, very good. So it's a lot of guessing right now as to what Andrey's skills actually are. But overall, seemingly, with the regional tape, decent fighter. But you're going to have to be more than decent to beat Christian Leroy Duncan, because he's a very good striker. He's a high-pressure fighter. He has 9 finishes in 10 wins. He's a powerful striker. He's going to come forward with the pressure, with the speed, with the creativity. Everything he throws at you has some heat on it. But if things come back his way and things aren't going as well as they should, he'll actually work in a takedown or two. We saw that in the Ribeiro fight. He had no problem shooting a takedown, had no problem engaging in that kind of fight. Overall, Christian Leroy Duncan is very good. I think he wins. I think he wins by finish. $9,600 may be worth it. You may want him in your lineup, especially 9 wins by stoppage in a 10-win career. And even in that decision win. Where's that decision win? Where's the decision win? Oh, that's right. It wasn't in the UFC. In the UFC, he's lost 2 decisions. The last one was to Gregory Rodriguez, where he just got taken down and controlled over and over and over. He turned Gregory into a grappler. I think Christian wins this fight, and I think you could probably have him in your lineups. Then we have a couple of heavyweights with a lot of questions. You're going to see Marcin Tybura is $8,200. He is officially the underdog. Mick Parkin is now the favorite. The betting line has flipped, but as we all know, DraftKings Fantasy stays the same. Marcin Tybura has built a career on just being a grinder. He's not a typical heavyweight with big power. He's not a typical heavyweight with just a scary presence. He moves forward, throws a whole bunch of punches that don't have a lot of sting on it, looks to get you to the cage, looks to grapple. That's his game plan every time. Now, on the ground, he's more active than most. On the ground, he'll make you eat some elbow sandwiches. He'll put you to work. He can finish people on the ground. But he has to get it to the ground. He does not have the greatest takedowns, but what he does have is good pressure, a willingness to hold you against the cage, to drag, to grind, and really make you work for it. He's taken on local favorite Mick Parkin. Mick Parkin is a good-sized heavyweight. He's not a small guy, but with that size comes lumbering speed. He is slow as shit. Mick Parkin is not particularly fast. He is very slow. But what he does do really well is slow you down. He'll lean on your arms. He'll hang on the head. He'll close the distance, because at distance, he's not always going to be the faster guy. But in distance, he can wear you down. He can drag you. Mick Parkin does a phenomenal job keeping the speed where he wants it and where he needs it. Occasionally, he'll work in some takedowns. He'll grapple really, really well, better than most heavyweights will. And he is coming off his first ever UFC finish over Lucas Brzeski. But he's another guy where, yes, he knocked out Lucas Brzeski, but we don't see a ton of big one-punch knockout power from Mick Parkin. He is undefeated in his career, but this is absolutely his toughest test. I do think Mick Parkin wins this fight. I think he passes this test. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be worth the money or not. I know he's a very affordable $8,000. But if we look at points that he's put on the board previously, he beat Jamal Pokes. He put up 69 points. This might look like this fight, where he didn't get the wrestling going, but he slowed the pace, got the jab going, was able to win a decision. With Kyle Machado, he had 3 takedowns. He's not going to take down Marcin Tybura 3 times. That's not going to happen. So that's where he scored okay points. In his last fight, 2 fights ago against Usman, 59 points in a decision. And then obviously he finished Lucas Brzeski. He's not going to, he could finish Marcin. Marcin's been dropped bad. He got finished by Tom Aspinall. He got dropped in his last fight before surviving. I think Mick Parkin is going to win this fight similar to how he beat Muhammad Usman, similar to how he beat Jamal Pogues. I think he's going to slow the pace, get his hands going, and just be younger and fresher. I think that's how he wins. And if that is how he wins, he's not going to score a ton of points. Probably not going to have him in my lineup. Then we have Loughran Kavanagh taking on Felipe dos Santos. Loughran, I want to say Loughran. It's L-O-N-E-R. Loughran Kavanagh is insanely fast. That is his best attribute. Like, if you're building a video game version of him and you're doing all the skills and you only have 100 points to use between striking, speed, power, and grappling, instead of 25, 25, 25, 25, it would be 80 points on speed, 10 on striking, 10 on power. That's it. Grappling's not really there. He's lightning fast. He literally beats people to the punch. He beat Jose Ochoa in his UFC debut. He beat him to the punch every single time. Every time, just beat him to the punch. They threw at the same time, Lohner's landed. And that's his biggest asset. He does have a full 15 minutes of cardio, and that's because he doesn't go wild. He's not high volume. He doesn't chase. He picks his spots. He gets there very quickly, and he is a genuine prospect. He's got a ton of composure. He doesn't really wilt under pressure. And that's going to be important here because he's fighting Felipe dos Santos. Felipe dos Santos will bring the pressure. You will find out if you break under pressure or not if you're fighting Felipe dos Santos. Because he's going to move forward, he's going to get in your face, and he's going to fight like a shoot-a-box fighter. Everybody that fight camp fights the same. They move forward, they throw, they get hit a shit ton, but they'll take their beating and try to deliver one in the meantime. He's very hittable. He is very reckless, but again, nonstop forward pressure. And if Lohner doesn't back up as well as he moves forward, he could be in some trouble because Felipe is going to move forward. Ultimately, Lohner's going to be the pick. I think he's just too fast, too clean, and we know for a fact Felipe is going to slow down because he fades. That pressure doesn't maintain for 15 full minutes. So I'm going to pick Lohner. I think his veteran-style composure is going to serve him well because even if he gives up the first round, I don't think he's going to panic, and I think he'll slowly take over. I don't think I'm going to put him in my DraftKings fantasy lineup because Felipe is very tough. I don't think he's just going to like one-punch sleep Felipe dos Santos. And I do think backing up, getting sort of Felipe off of him may keep the volume low, may prevent some things from happening. So I'm going to pick Lohner Kavanagh as a pick, but DraftKings Fantasy, I don't think he's worth the money when we have other fighters who could definitely win by finish. Then we have Jacob's underdog lock of the week in Chris Padilla, and he is fighting Jai Herbert. Listen, the Jai Herbert fans hate this take. I get it. But Jai Herbert is living off of a knockout loss from 2022. This is what he's built his career on. This little one right here under knockdown. Yeah, he knocked down Ilia Topuria. Exactly 3 years ago. He knocked down Ilia Topuria in a fist fight. And then Ilia knocked his dumb ass out. That's how that went. But after he knocked down Ilia, and after Ilia went on to have some success, everybody talked about, oh, the Jai Herbert power, such a phenomenal striker, unbelievable striker. Who did he beat? Kyle Nelson in a 3-round back-and-forth war? He had that draw with Ludovic Klein where he had to shoot a takedown. Faraz Ziam got his ass. And then he beat Rolando Bedoya, who is no longer in the UFC. I fully understand Jai Herbert actually is a good striker. He's a technical striker. He's long. He's lean. He does a really good job keeping things at range and staying busy. He moves from side to side really well. So I'm not trying to diminish who Jai Herbert is as a fighter because I do think he's a pretty good fighter. I think he's a good striker. I think he's a very middle-of-the-pack kind of guy. I don't think he's amazing at anything. But he has built an entire career and an entire reputation off of one dropping of one guy 3 years ago. And I think that chicken's going to come home to roost. He's $8,300. He is a favorite here, as he should be, because he's the more established UFC fighter. I mean, he fought some good guys. Francisco Trinaldo, Renato Moicano, he beat Cam Worthy, but I think Cam Worthy had like 5 UFC fights, got knocked out in every single one of them. Obviously, lost to Topuria, lost to Faraz Ziam, who's not terrible. But Jai Herbert's got a different kind of opponent in front of him because he has an unranked Chris Padilla. Chris Padilla is nobody special as far as name notoriety is concerned. He hasn't beat anybody unbelievable. He doesn't have any hype behind him. What he does have, though, is a well-rounded skill set and a willingness to fight. Chris Padilla is tough as shit. Chris Padilla can fight on the feet. He can fight on the ground. He can fight like a Nurmagomedov. He can do the distance striking. He can fight in the pocket. He just stopped Rong Zhu with a TKO by blasting him in the face with an elbow that exploded his eye. In the middle of a round, boom, eye exploded. He beat James Yontop by taking him down and submitting him. The same James Yontop that was a human punching bag for Mauricio Ruffy that he went the distance with. I think Chris Padilla can win this fight. I think he does win this fight. I think I'm going to have him in my lineup at $7,900, literally because he has more ways to win. Jai Herbert wins this fight if he can keep it standing and stay on the outside, which he may be able to do. He's a good kickboxer. But Chris Padilla can win this fight by getting it to the ground. Chris Padilla can win this fight by closing the distance, staying in the pocket, making it ugly, making it dirty. I think Chris Padilla does win this fight. I think he absolutely can win this fight, and I'm going to pick him. And I will probably have him in my lineup. We get that sub 8,000 price point on a guy that has 2 fights in the UFC with 2 finishes. One of them over James Yantab, who's impossible to finish. Another over Rong Zhu, who's a very good, powerful striker. I think Chris Padilla, more ways to win, does win. Then we have Morgan Charriere taking on Nathaniel Wood. This is another tricky fight to break down because I think Morgan is very, very good. I am going to pick him here. I will probably put him in my lineup. I'm probably going to do it because of how highly I regard Morgan's skills and the way he fights. Morgan's an explosive striker. He's light on his feet. He stalks his opponents. Then he'll leap into punches. He can work for control. We'll see him work in some takedowns as well. He has great composure in the octagon. He has an ability to take a fight wherever he wants it to go. Lightning fast, tons of power. Morgan Charriere is very, very, very good. The only fight he lost in the UFC was a split decision to Chepe Mariscal, who's been an absolute buzzsaw as of late. I like Morgan Charriere to win. I'm probably going to have my lineup, but we can't just discredit Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood is good. He is a good fighter. He's not little tiny Jake Hadley. He's not just like a little dude moving up in weight trying to... And there is some of that, of course, but he's very good, and he can hang with the bigger guys because he's lightning fast. He hits very hard. He's a good striker, solid power, great dirty boxing if you hang out in the pocket too long. He can grapple as well. He has, 8 takedowns in his last 5 fights? Nathaniel Wood has no problem. First of all, it's not 8, you dumb asshole. It's 9. Second of all, he has no problem also going wherever the fight goes. Morgan Charriere will strike or grapple. Nathaniel Wood will strike or grapple. He's not particularly dangerous, which is his biggest problem in this and most other matchups. Because if he starts to fall behind, he can't just take over with one punch. He can't just take over with one knee. It's very hard to turn the tides. The way Muhammad Naimov beat him was a little bit of cheating, right? A couple of fence grabs, a little bit of that. I think a nut shot or two, maybe an eye poke. There was a little bit. But also the bully, the size of Naimov, the pressure of Naimov gave Nathaniel Wood a little bit of trouble. I think that same size, the same pressure coming from Morgan will do more of the same. I'm going to pick Morgan Charriere to win, and I might spend that money because while I'm not positive he'll get a finish, I do think he may end up working in more takedowns than he normally does because of how good Nathaniel Wood is on his feet. And as we all know, takedowns in DraftKings Fantasy score really well. Then we have Jordan Vucenic taking on Chris Duncan. Jordan Vucenic, $9,300. He is somebody that I do think should be in a lineup. I think he wins. I think he wins by finish. Jordan Vucenic is an accomplished fighter. He did really well on the regional scene. Then he stepped up into the UFC on short notice, fighting Guram Kutateladze up in weight. And he seems to be sticking around lightweight, so maybe it's not permanently... Or maybe it's not up in weight because he's just there permanently. But either way, Jordan Vucenic started his MMA career with no background whatsoever. Wasn't a striker, wasn't a grappler, nothing. And has been piecing together skills along the way. A blank slate. And now he's a very well-rounded guy who has incredible striking. Very real power. Plenty of cardio when he has a full fight camp, which he did not in his last fight. He is tough. He is a finisher. He dropped Guram almost immediately in that first fight. And he dropped him with a nice, clean straight. It wasn't just some looping head-down bullshit that he caught. He didn't catch him. He threw a perfect punch, and it landed clean. But it was short notice. He started to slow down. Guram ended up taking over in that fight. Jordan Vucenic is very good, very dangerous. He's fighting the always durable, the sort of, I don't want to say reliable because he's not reliable, but the predictable Chris Duncan. And I say predictable because there's no real tricks up his sleeve. Chris Duncan is a meat and potatoes kind of guy. He's tough as shit. He's a tough striker. He's never out of a fight. You're never going to see him quit. You will see him get dropped. You'll see him get almost finished, and you'll see him sort of rise up like The Undertaker and just keep coming forward. He's a good striker. Actual solid technique. He does keep his hands lower than he should. This is why he gets hit so much. He's got lots of power, and he is willing to bang. He can struggle with control if he gets some takedowns, but he does have some submissions up his sleeve, and we saw that in his last fight where he submitted Balaji after Balaji was the one winning. Balaji was backing up Chris. Balaji was landing cleaner. And then Chris Duncan snatched up a guillotine and ended up getting that win. The reality is, Jordan Duncan's not Balaji. Sure, he's probably not as fast as Balaji, but he hits just as hard. He's bigger, and he's not going to make weird mistakes like shooting takedowns. I think Jordan can put Chris Duncan away. That's why he's going to be in my lineup. I think Jordan wins this fight, and he's one of the fighters that I've gotten more confident in as the week has gone on. When I first broke this down, I was like, I think Jordan should win, but Chris's durability really has me nervous. But then as the week goes on, the more you look at it, the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, it's like if I'm just relying on Chris Duncan's durability, if that's what's preventing me from really picking and betting on Jordan, that's crazy. Because in order for Chris Duncan to be durable, that means he's getting the shit kicked out of him. Nobody knows how durable you are if you're not getting almost finished all the time. So Jordan should get the finish this time. Then we have Molly McCann. Where the hell are you, Molly? Then we have Molly McCann taking on short notice UFC newcomer Alexia Tainara. Molly McCann, we all know at this point, meatball Molly. She's going to move forward. She's going to slug it out. Maybe she'll wrestle. That's it. She did get a BJJ brown belt, but I promise you, her jiu-jitsu sucks. I don't know why she got a brown belt. I don't know why they gave it to her. They shouldn't have. Just because you're a fighter that wins a couple fights in the cage doesn't mean there's a direct correlation between winning a fight in the cage and what your belt should be in jiu-jitsu. Because we've seen Molly McCann get absolutely smoked on the ground. Smoked. Anyway, Molly McCann is a tough-as-nails striker. She's strong. She's in phenomenal shape. She has no fear whatsoever of getting into a fight. And she does have a couple of spinning back elbow knockouts. I think Molly McCann in this fight and most every other fight is just going to move forward, strike her ass off with no intent on wrestling. But if you wrestle her, that'll almost like trigger. It'll awaken, oh shit, I know how to do more than just strike. And then she'll start wrestling. It is very rare to see Molly initiate a takedown for no reason. You'll see her start shooting takedowns after people shoot them on her. And like I said, it just sort of like triggers, oh wait, I can do multiple things. Molly McCann is only $7,300 in DraftKings Fantasy. Guess what? Probably in my lineup. She is taking on UFC newcomer Alexia Tainara. Alexia Tainara is stepping up on short notice. Molly McCann's original opponent, Estela Nunes, done, gone, off the card, sayonara. Alexia stepping up on short notice. Alexia's got a phenomenal record. It's like 11-1 or 10-1, something like that. Great record. But then you go and you watch the tape. And Alexia comes out, chin in the air, just marching forward, throwing crazy, chin in the air. Yes, she can wrestle. And she beat on the Contender Series a very good wrestler. But I don't think it's going to fully matter. A, this is short notice. And B, with her chin in the air, I imagine Molly's going to tag her up. And is Molly going to one-punch knock her out? No, probably not. But what Molly will do is throw and connect and land. And I think that's going to get Alexia nervous, taking desperate shots from too far away, which are easily defended. And then I think Molly McCann will continue to take over on the striking and win this fight. Alexia is a decent fighter. And I almost got trapped by her record. I saw the record. I was like, whoop, there we go. And then I watched the tape. I'm like, oh, she's not that good. And it's short notice. People who think Alexia is going to win this fight thinks that she's going to out-grapple Molly, which is a plausible thing to think. We've seen Molly get out-grappled. But I personally think the short notice is going to be a problem. And as we know, you get hit a few times, the shots get worse and worse, and the worse the shots are, the more you're going to get hit. I think Molly wins this fight, and I think she's at a phenomenal price point. Then we have Gunnar Nelson taking on Kevin Holland. Let's look at the dates of Gunnar Nelson. His last fight, 2 years ago against Brian Barberena, no longer in the UFC. The fight before that, 3 years ago against Hikashi Sato, no longer in the UFC. The fight before that, 6 years ago against Burns. He's one of the most inactive guys on the planet. And they asked him at media day, hey, why are you inactive? I'm just focusing on my family. Oh, okay. How do you feed them? Don't you make money? You just coach little kids? And I'm having a little bit of a go at him. He is a good fighter, which means he can win this fight. He's got that long karate style striking. He does have good grappling. We've seen him incorporate solid takedowns and good jiu-jitsu. The problem is the inactivity. The reason I went through how infrequently he fights is because I think that matters very, very much. He shows up every couple of years when the UFC comes to London. He gets a big pop. They throw him on a main card. Ooh, Gunnar Nelson. They give him an easy-ass matchup, and then he leaves. That's what it's been, and that's what I think people think is happening here. But Kevin Holland is not an easy matchup. The only easy matchup against Kevin Holland is somebody who can wrestle their ass off. That's it. Because De Ridder is a giant 185-pounder. He was able to take down Kevin Holland and get it done. Kutateladze, you're going to see the KO, TKO. Kevin broke his rib on a takedown exchange. Olajaychuk, they got to the ground, was submitted almost immediately. Michael Venom Page, this was a fun back and forth fight. Kevin did not win the fight. There wasn't an argument for him to win, but it was a fun back and forth fight. And Michael Venom Page might quite literally be the best striker at this weight class. Then Jack Della Maddalena. That was a very close fight who some people feel Kevin Holland won. And Jack's fighting for a title. Before that, submits Michael Chiesa. Finishes Ponzinibbio, who's still getting wins at this level. Kevin Holland, he broke his hand against Wonderboy Thompson. Obviously, Chimaev is Chimaev. This right here, September 10th, 2022, is when things started to go downhill for Kevin Holland. This is when he got life-changing money. Stepped up on short notice, fought Chimaev after the fight card had to get rearranged because of a wild weight miss. He got life-changing money. Then he fought Wonderboy. He broke his hand in that fight. That was a good competitive fight. He broke his hand in that fight. Then he beats Ponzinibbio, beats Chiesa. At this point, he still cares about his career when he fights JDM. Loses. Fights Venom Page. Loses, but Venom's very, very good. He beats Olajaychuk, and then boom, we're back up to 185 pounds. He loses to main event winner Kutateladze, loses to De Ridder, who's about to fight Bo Nickel. People want to trash Kevin Holland. He's 1-4 in his last fight. He doesn't care about his career. Listen, these are good losses. Show me a bad loss. These are good losses. They're losses to very good fighters or very good specialists. And the specialty that gives Kevin Holland a lot of trouble is takedowns. I don't think that's going to be a problem here. He's at 170 and not 185. Gunnar Nelson is a good grappler, and he does have some takedowns, but he's got that ridiculously long karate style. I think it's going to be very hard for Gunnar Nelson to close the distance, transition from the long karate style to wrestling. Jacob wanted to say, well, Kevin Holland has already lost to the karate style in Page and in Wonderboy, but they're not wrestlers. Page and Wonderboy are strikers. He lost to it in a pure striking matchup. And they're the two best to do it that are actively on the roster. The only other person that did it as well as they did is Lyoto Machida. And he's been retired for 10 years. So Kevin Holland, I do think wins this fight. I think he's the better striker. I think the jiu-jitsu is definitely good enough to not get submitted by Gunnar Nelson. And maybe I'm crazy for picking Kevin Holland in 2025, but I am going to pick Kevin Holland in 2025, and I love the $7,700 price point. And we're going to need some room for that salary because I got $9,000 Carlos Ulberg in my lineup. Here's the reality of it. Carlos Ulberg is a good high-level striker. He only has one ever loss, and it was right here against Kennedy and Chukwu. He was dominating this fight. And then he got caught. Then he came out, he beat Fabio Cherant. Yes, no longer in the UFC. I get it. But he took his time, right? He wanted to prove that he has well-rounded skills. He actually shot a few offensive takedowns. Then he beat Tefan Nchukwi, Nick Negumereanu, Ihor Pateria, Daun Jung, Alonzo Menafield, where he blasted him half a second into him running across the cage. And then Volkan Ozdemir. The Volkan Ozdemir win is interesting because that is a good win against a very good fighter who has had success at this level. But also, he got hit a lot. He did not look very good in that fight. He got hit a lot. But Carlos Ulberg, relatively speaking, is young. I think he's 33 years old. He's a very good kickboxer. He seemingly has great cardio. We just saw him go to a decision where he wasn't really slowing down that bad. Carlos Ulberg is a good fighter. And he is fighting a former world champion in Jan Blachowicz, but this is a former world champion who is 42 years old, who has not fought in 2 years, who doesn't have a win in 3 years. And this was a fluke win. Racic broke his leg. So his last legitimate win was in 2021 against a middleweight. The last time he beat a light heavyweight was in 2020, 5 years ago, against Dominic Reyes. And this is when Dominic Reyes was getting knocked out left and right by everybody who looked at him. So I do like Jan Blachowicz. I think he's a great human being, seemingly a normal, nice, fun guy. But I just don't think he's going to get this win. At a certain point, age matters. And if Jan was like Glover, right? If Jan was like Glover Teixeira at 40-something years old, but with great wrestling, then it'd be a little different. We'll find out. But he doesn't have great wrestling. Yeah, he took down Alex Pereira 3 times. But that was 2 years ago when he was younger. He didn't have multiple surgeries. I think Jan's had shoulder and knee surgery. I got to go Carlos Ulberg here, and I will spend the money in my DraftKings fantasy lineup. Then we have the main event of the evening, Sean Brady and Leon Edwards. First thing I want to say here is go with your gut on this one. Pick your side. I'm not going to try to convince you in one way or another because I myself am a bit conflicted. Sean Brady has put together a nice little resume for himself. The way he just beat Gilbert Burns with 7 takedowns, 165 points, that's insane. Before that, the win over Gastelum, where he subbed Gastelum, that was also wildly impressive. He lost to Bilal Muhammad, and at the time, he was a laughingstock, right? At the time, it was, you just lost to the most boring wet blanket. You just lost to a wrestler in a striking match. Well, now Bilal's the world champion. The world champion. That was 3 years ago. Bilal is the world champion right now. So I think we can stop laughing at that. Before that, he beats Chiesa, Jake Matthews, Aguilera, Nurdayev, Court McGee. Sean Brady's put together a nice little resume. He's got decent hands. He's got okay power. He's got good volume. He's got good wrestling and very good jiu-jitsu. Like, he's not a jiu-jitsu nerd, but he has the skills like a jiu-jitsu nerd. So if Sean Brady fights this fight exactly the way Bilal Muhammad did, he could absolutely beat Leon Edwards. But the question to me isn't what Sean Brady's going to do. It's what will Leon Edwards do? Because Leon Edwards is a phenomenal fighter. He's got great striking, great takedown defense, great scrambles. Leon Edwards is the better fighter in almost every one of his matchups. The problem is, even when he wins, lots of times it's just a staring contest. He lost to Bilal Muhammad because he was just backing up. He was flat. A dud of a performance. He did nothing. He did nothing to try to win that fight. It was a really, really bad performance, and Bilal Muhammad sort of ran through him. Obviously, there was a few flashes. He would spin out real quick, end up on top, and whoa. But ultimately, he didn't do anything. He didn't pull the trigger. Same with the Colby Covington fight. Yeah, he beat Colby, but Colby did nothing in that fight. And the one time Colby tried to do something, you could see what the path to victory was. And obviously, the two Usman fights are what they are. And let's not forget, Nate Diaz almost finished Leon Edwards in the 5th round. Leon Edwards is the better fighter in most fights as far as skills are concerned, but I don't know if you can count on him to do what he's supposed to do. If he was defending his title at home and was still backing up, not putting on the pressure, not trying to outright win, how can we trust him to do it again here? And that's the problem. But obviously, if you're on the Leon side, stay on the Leon side. He's affordable, and he's a great fighter. I'm going to be on the other side of this. I'm going to have Sean Brady in my lineup. Guys, that's the breakdown. If you give a shit at all about your Saturdays watching fights, trying to make $1 or $2, I recommend you go to WeWantPicks.com and unlock all the tools, all the picks, all the bets. We have a full suite of copy-paste bets. We have a full suite of tools like the DraftKings cheat sheet, the optimizer that will build lineups for you, the event simulator that simulates fights 100,000 times. We also have tools like the data analyzer. The data analyzer is a tool that pulls in not only historical but future fights as well, all the way out to UFC 315. You can come in here, start doing your research, start adding filters, removing filters, updating the chart, and you see how I'm hovering over this little button here? So now I get to see, oh, this fight was against Takashi Sato. It was a win. He won by rear naked choke. But if I click this button, the video will pop up and I could watch the actual fight. Every single pick, bet, tool, and everything else we offer is available right now. One package, $10. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top.